All right, it's actually January 1st when I'm filming this, and I spent the last day or so trying to write down what my goals, intentions are for this next year to have this video. And so we're going to discuss it. It's definitely not as quantifiable as goals videos I've done in the past, where it's been like, I want to read X number of these things and X number of this, trying to have a way of measuring if I've accomplished a goal, which is important for goals. In my head, when I set a goal, there does need to be a way to measure if I've accomplished it, or I just won't care about it or prioritize it anymore. And kind of as I've been talking in a lot of my end of the year videos, I feel like I have approached, met, said hi to, become acquainted with burnout. And I'm trying to make sure it doesn't get worse. I'm trying to make sure I still hold on to things that I love doing, like this channel, like reading. So a lot of my goals are actually not, I think, as ambitious as other people, but also I think are going to be equally hard because I am such like a hard worker sort of person, like that toxic trait of just keep pushing through, keep doing, that's me. I don't like that about myself, but there's definitely a lot of that in me. There's a lot of me that'll just push. So I'm trying to set my goals intentionally so that I still read what I want to read, focus on what I want to do, still challenge myself, but also it's not just about the numbers, because I think that was the thing, is I read more than I ever had before last year. I'll have a stats video going up next week. We can really unpack it, but that wasn't good for me. It wasn't that suddenly while I was reading all of these things, I found so many more new favorites. I actually probably found comparably, like percentage-wise, less favorites than normal. Like you would think, okay, you would find maybe comparably the same percentage, but you'd have more favorites. But like it was harder for me to make my top 10 list this year than any other year because there were a lot of great books, but there weren't a lot of like fantastic books. And there weren't even that many like bad books. There was just a lot of mid, and obviously there has to be a middle. But I would like to reduce the amount of time I spend there, or at least check in on myself. So that's like where I'm coming at these goals from. Plus, I'm still in like a transitionary period in my life. I'm starting a new job in like 2 days. We are getting married this summer. Like, who knows where we're going next? And I think flexibility is key. And that's who I am when I come to my goals and intentions. I check in each quarter. Halfway through the years, I reassess and figure out what is serving me, what is doing good, where do I need to pivot. So none of this is set in stone, but that's how I approach these. So I guess quickly, we will discuss the more like tangible. I have put down some things that I can check off with boxes, and that is, okay, number of books I want to read. And I think realistically, I'm not going to be someone who can really reduce that much I read because I like reading a lot, but I think I was somewhere in the 160s. And that was too much. And in years past where I felt good was in the 130s. And I want to let myself read even less if that happens. So I'm setting it at 120. I really don't want it to hit 140 or 150 unless I'm feeling really good. But typically I do get really burnt out by November or December. So chances are I won't be feeling really good if I hit those numbers. So 10-ish books a month is what I would like to do. And I've already started with my TBRs, only planning for like 2/3 of that. So if I plan for 2/3 of 10, that gives me some mood reading room. And that leads me to, for me, a very challenging goal, which is to have 12 mood reads this year. And I know for you mood readers out there, that's just how you live. For me, it's really difficult. I have had some people talk to me about it's less about knowing your mood and knowing what you're not in the mood for and listening to that. So I'm going to take it from that approach, but also as I make my TBRs, in my head being like, do not fill all 10 slots. One of these slots is going to be you at some point in the month. Whenever you feel like it, Angela, let yourself feel it. Pick up a book you want to read, which I've already sort of done in the spirit of, but not quite because it was on my TBR, but I started a book way sooner than I should have based off where my obligation schedule is. But that's at least in spirit of the goal. So 12 mood reads. So in theory, one intentional mood read a month. Obviously, that's probably not how it's going to go down because that's not how life is. But that's like the intention, is let myself explore in that space. But I also do love planning. I love planning so much. So finding that new balance is going to be interesting. Also trying to help me with mood reading. This will probably be more based off that. Plus I do have reading plans that'll work for this too, but 12 rereads. I don't think I met that last year. I met like 11 rereads, which isn't bad, but I love rereading. I love reconsuming. I rewatch things all the time. it's who I am. I'm more comfortable that way. And for some reason, I'm also equally the person who's like, no spoilers. Everything's a spoiler. I'm very spoiler sensitive. I put that all on myself. I don't get mad at people when they talk about the synopses on the back of the book, like stuff like that. I'm just very good for myself at hiding things that aren't that important to hide from myself. So yeah, that's just another tangent of like, what's wrong with my brain. But sometimes I think if I get into a certain mood, instead of trying to find a new book that might fit that mood, I could also just reread a favorite that fits that type of feeling. That might be part of the mood reads, I don't know, but putting it here at least means, try and do this, Angela. I used to have number goals for like short story collections and stuff like that. I naturally do that now. I don't think I need to keep track of it, because that's another thing about goals is sometimes I keep track of them just because. And like the only reason I gave you guys a book number goal is because like that's what most people talk about, but like internally, I don't really care. I'm putting that there because I'm trying to say in my free time, this is how much of my free time I want to allocate to this, because I want to do other things with my free time as well without, shoving this to the side. Like, that's why I'm giving it a number. But like, I'm not doing it because I think it's a particularly challenging number for me per se, other than maybe trying not to, go 30 books above that. So those are kind of some number things. And so getting more into these nebulous, don't overextend yourself goals, Angela. The first one is DNFing a book when it feels like I should. Obviously, there are some books I read that I really can't DNF. If I sign up to be part of a live stream for something, I feel the need to finish a book, unless it's just aggressively harmful to me and my mental health, I probably will. I run a local book club. They do pay me in gift cards to the bookstore to moderate it, so it would feel really weird to DNF a book that I am moderating the conversation of. So that's always a book that I need to finish. And similarly, I try really hard not to DNF things that people vote for me on Patreon unless it's really not serving me. I have DNF'd in the past, but like those are kind of spaces where it's like, this is hard, and like I can just read. Like I'm able to set aside time each day to read like 50 pages a day of something I don't really like. I don't like doing that. It's not my favorite thing, but I know that I will still need to do that. Not everything can be a perfect reading experience. But for the other books that no one cares about but me, that I'm just reading for myself, I need to be better at checking in and being like, is this book still giving me what I wanted it to give? How is it entertaining me, helping me, teaching me, whatever it's doing for my reading life, is it doing that? And someone gave a good suggestion when I was talking about, I forget which video it was on. It was on one of my end of the year videos. Someone left a comment about, essentially the idea was, throw a bookmark in, and when you get to that bookmark, you check. Well, I read a lot of ebooks, so that's not the idea, but I definitely could check in like about 100 pages into a book, halfway through the book, and like mentally just be like, okay, you've been reading this for a while now. Are you reading it just to read it, or is there a purpose to reading it? Is it bringing me joy? Is it interesting even if it's a lot of hard work? Like what's it doing? Or is it just happening? Because those are the books I'm trying to DNF, are not necessarily the ones that are super challenging or anything like that. It's more just the books that are completely, totally fine. So we'll see. And I kind of want to check in on that either every month or every quarter, just to see, like, when I go through like my wrap up, being like, was there anything in here that I didn't need to finish? Like, would I have felt just the same if I had never finished that book? You know what I'm saying? Like, because I'm such an endings person, and I get so scared that if the ending could change everything, because that does happen to me. That does. Like, I know for some people they can tell right away, and for some books I can, but sometimes an ending can really change things. It really can. Other channel-related goals in terms of don't overextend myself is I used to, somehow, who knows how, I used to do 3 videos a week with a bonus 4th video that was normally a review. I think the entirety of 2021, that's what I was doing, somehow, in most of 2020. And then this year, it started off at 3 with 4, and then became 3, and then it became like 2 with 3. And near the end of the year, I've ramped back up to 3 because there's a lot of content to do that's really fun. So it's like not difficult to think of like ideas, even though I just have felt that filming 3 videos a week is just not as fun for me as it used to be. And I don't want to get burnt out on that. So I want to make it so it's just 2 videos for sure, Tuesday and Friday, with the potential for a bonus 3rd that might be a review, or might be like, oh, I had all these ideas for this month and they're really timely, so I just need to like squeeze that in. I know that doesn't matter to the average person watching my channel, but there will always be a Friday video. That is like my always get that up by Friday slot. If I'm doing 2 videos a week, it'll probably be a Tuesday and Friday. And if I'm doing 3, it'll probably be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I don't know. And I know no one really needs a schedule or anything like that, but that's mentally where I am with like making channel videos, because I just find that suddenly I'm spending my emotional energy that I would have rather spent reading, playing video games, watching TV with Ryan, trying to find the energy to do the work, to make the video idea, to then film the video. And that's the part that's hard for me. It's just the actual sit down and filming. Editing, I can usually find the time. Thumbnails and captions are a lot of work, but like, I mean, I say thumbnails are a lot of work. They're not. My thumbnails aren't that amazing, but I hate doing them. So it's just kind of one of those things where just cutting down to 2 videos for sure a week, the weight off my shoulders. It makes it instantly more fun. So that's what I'm going to do until I get the itch, probably whenever there are certain videos. It's like, oh, I want to do all these things, and then I'll do them. But that's kind of like a channel thing of don't extending myself. One that's kind of sad, and this is going to be the hardest for me, is I love being in lives. I love being in discussion videos. It's such a fun part of BookTube. I love being in reading sprints. But I am the type of person who is really bad at saying no to things, and then suddenly I go from having a week that's completely open to suddenly having no free time in the evenings. And that's like every day of the week. And I need to have that under control, which means unfortunately sometimes if someone asks me, can you do this thing, I will have to say no because I've already, built up on stuff. So I'm trying not to overdo it with lives, which has already been hard because I've already had to exercise that thing. But just know that I want to be a part of everything if you invite me. Time is so finite, and if I don't let myself recharge, especially with a new job, especially with it being winter where I sometimes will just need to veg, that's not sustainable. 2 other things I want to try and do with like my reading life habits, which is why these are hard to like quantify or anything like that. But I think I'll just try and check in every quarter and see if I fell into these patterns. One is I do a really bad job at front loading my month with obligations. And what I mean by that is like this month is a very good example. On Sunday I have a book club and on Monday I have a book club, which means I need to read both of those books before those book clubs, and both of those are book clubs that I can't just DNF those books, which is not a bad thing. I'm hoping to like both of the books, but it doesn't provide me with a lot of flexibility if I wasn't feeling one of those books. So trying to at max have 2 obligations a week so I can have a third read slipped in there as like my escapist or something like that. Or, if I just choose to escape with video games or TV, just having that space. Because if I end up having 3 or 4 obligations in a week, suddenly all I have time to do in my free time is read. And it might not even be reading things I want to read, which is like the definition of getting into a slumpy space. So that's one thing is like kind of similar with the lives. It's just like, try not to clump those things together. Be okay with saying to whoever I'm buddy reading with or maybe doing a live with, like, hey, I want to do this, but can we do it the next week or something like that? I hate being the person that asks for those sort of things, but I just need to probably be better about it, especially with buddy reads where people generally are pretty flexible. So that's another one. And then the last one is, again, it's kind of a weird habit of like, I don't know if you guys get like this when you're like reading a book and maybe you don't even care about the book, but you're like, oh, but I can finish it in 3 hours. And so I'll just sit down and read it. I've done that a lot this past year of like, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. I have nothing else to do. If I just sit down and finish it, I can be done in like 3 or 4 hours and then it's done. And sometimes that gives me serotonin, and other times it's like, why did I just spend 6 hours reading this book I didn't like? So I'm trying, when I'm thinking about the DNFing situation, when I get to a book where I'm suddenly only reading it to just finish it, to stop myself. So that's like a thought process that I'm trying to catch, because that's something that I notice for books that are just fine for me, is I start falling into that, turning on the timer on the e-reader to be like, okay, you only have this much left, or it's the audiobook. It's like, well, if I have it at 2.5 times speed, I'll be done with it in X amount of time. Like, audiobook I'm a little more forgiving of, because normally I can do that while doing other things, and if those are things I have to do. But also, I could listen to a better audiobook. So those are kind of sort of the things I'm trying to use to track my reading habits, to hopefully just have less average experiences, less forgettable reading experiences, because I don't really care if it's like negative or positive as long as I have a memory with something that I read. If I, consume a piece of art and there was an interaction and an exchange, then it's worth it. But I've read a lot of things this last year where it wasn't worth it. So I'm just trying to mitigate that and mitigate burnout. So we'll see. But I do have one project that I'm really excited for myself. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I will let it be flexible. But like I said at the top of this video, we're getting married this year and we're going to go to South America. Half my family lives in Venezuela. We cannot get married in Venezuela. I don't even think you can fly there. but we are getting married in Colombia, specifically Cartagena, if you know the area. And something that I've been doing the past couple years, and I've realized, especially because South America doesn't have too many countries. I mean, Australia has the least amount of countries for a continent, but South America doesn't have too many. And I've read a lot of translated works from a lot of the countries in South America. And I have a few left. I have, I don't know, I think 10 or 9 countries left that I haven't read from. And it's like, I would really like to read works from those other countries, just because I think that'd be really fun. And I really like reading South American literature. Kind of helps me fill in a lot of knowledge gaps and cultural gaps between like what my experience in living in North America has been versus people who've lived in South America and like my family and things like that. In addition to wanting to read works from those countries translated, I want to try and read at least 2 nonfiction on like the history of South America, because that's something that's always interested me. I don't know if that'll naturally show up in any other reading situations that I'm in, but especially after reading Gates of Europe and Red Famine last year for Ukraine and really filling in that part of like my knowledge gap. And I read a nonfiction on Palestine, like either I think the year before that or maybe also last year, because last year's like a blur, but I really like reading that type of nonfiction. So I'll, specifically for sure, I bet one of those will be on Venezuela, because like there's a lot I know because of what my family tells me, but there's not a lot that I know based off, people both in the country and outside of the country who are like analyzing and writing this down for the history books. Like obviously all nonfictions have biases and agendas. So for sure I want to read one, hopefully one that's as neutral as can be so I can just get a lot of the information, but also just the rich history of South America I just know so little about, especially when I read A Long Petal of the Sea by Isabel Allende. I was just like, none of this is surprising, but there's so little of this that I was taught. Like 20th century South America history is fascinating. So that's something I'd like to do. That's like a project that like, especially because I get to go back to South America for the first time since I think 2001. I kind of want to do that because I think it'd just be a fun project and fulfilling in many ways, especially because now we'll get into 2 other channel goals and just some like life thingies, nothing too crazy. But so my stretch goals, I wrote them down as stretch goals in my little like planner, because I use the always fully booked planner, and it has a nice little goals page. But they're stretch goals, okay? They're stretch goals. That doesn't mean they're happening. But I have played around with the idea for a while of actually like emailing some of my favorite authors to maybe have author interviews or author panels, and I just think that'd be really fun. I have some ideas that have almost become like tangible potential email drafts, so we will see, but that's an idea that I think would be a really fun thing to like push myself for the channel, because like I've always liked to have things that are like things I've wanted to do to push myself. Last year was having the read along and things like that, and another one is I do have video project ideas. I don't always have the mental energy to put in the extra work needed for it. So that's another thing. And then like I have my recent release roundup series, which I really like and I think is really useful, but it's in an astronomical amount of work that I don't always every month have the headspace for. But I also have my completionist brain. It's like, Angela, you haven't done October through December yet. You need to get that done, which I do think I have ideas for how to catch up and keep going. But that's another thing, is I need to let myself be flexible, not be such a completionist, and this is a hobby. I mean, it's a hobby that gives me some cash to spend on my pets, but it's still primarily a hobby. It's not something that could ever be a full-time job for me, so I just need to give myself some grace because I have a full-time job. That sort of thing. In terms of life goals, if anyone cares about these things, I'm now in the 30 club, which is great. I don't mind being 30. I don't mind age in general so far in my life. I've always liked my birthday. But something that I've been needing to do in my 20s that I've only kind of done is yoga or stretching or just caring for one's body in any meaningful way. And now, especially since it's not a joke when people say when you turn 30 something happens. My body just doing basic things. Like I think Justine came to visit me this fall and I like stretched. I did like a normal stretch, tweaked my shoulder, and it took me months to get it back to normal. Like ridiculous things. And it's like, Angela, if you just do yoga 3 times a week, that will help you protect yourself and strengthen yourself from these dumb little things. Like obviously I'm still gonna age, still gonna get older, but I like doing yoga. It's really good for my physical and mental health. So 3 times a week is like, I want to make sure I'm cutting out time to do that, which sometimes takes a little more effort because that means I have to keep the space for it clean. Apartment life, man. Another thing I want to do is practice my Spanish. This year was like a huge year for me in my Spanish. I mean, it's still not great, but I've actually read a few chapters of books in Spanish. I've never gotten that far. I have watched parts of TV shows in Spanish. Music that I listened to this time last year where I didn't understand any of it, when I listen to it now, suddenly I understand it. So I want to continue that. I have some books that I think I would like to maybe read. Matilda. I think I can, I mean, obviously sometimes you would love to read something originally written in Spanish, but Matilda's a story I really love. I can get access to the audiobook and the ebook, and I think immersion reading that is probably one of those next steps for me, especially, you know, in terms of solidifying some grammar, because I'm still in that phase of figuring out grammar and sentence structure, because like that's the thing about translation that's so cool but also weird is like the wiring of when you expect information is so different. So I'm still working on making my brain's sort of expectation pathway of like when to expect certain information in a sentence so that things run smoothly. So that's one. I have a couple other books that I own in Spanish. One that I just got recently that you guys will see in a future Friday Reads when I show all like the books that I've acquired recently. So I want to continue doing that, especially because we're going to Colombia this summer, and that would be nice. And my friends and I made a Spanish group chat. That is chaos. That is not good. But that's also been kind of fun. And then my last goal is I want to complete 2 video games this year, which I know is like a really dumb goal, but I haven't completed a video game since like high school, and I'm actually having a lot of fun in Horizon Zero Dawn. I'm like 25% of the way through, according to its percentage thing, which I think means I'm like 2/3 of the way through the main quest if I like look through parts of it. But like I get distracted by every side quest and everything because again, completionist Angela should not be allowed to play open world games. For sure. But I'm having a lot of fun with that. I'm getting better at like being stressed. If you don't play video games growing up, playing video games can be a very stressful thing. I don't know. It's probably just a me thing. But I want to finish Horizon Zero Dawn. And then I don't know what the other one could be. I don't want to like put a name on it. But I have Mass Effect, which I was really liking before I got to a boss battle and stopped, which is story of me. I have Hades, which I'm really enjoying, especially with the sequel being announced. Hades is also the video game that lets me think I can play video games. That is what Hades is. And then the other one that I think I'm going to buy because it's on sale and because they finally have an updated version for the new systems is Witcher 3, which is like the video game that I've been wanting to play for years, but I just never felt confident enough. I had a lot of imposter syndrome, even though I know it's, you know, a PS3 game originally, I think. Maybe it's a PS4 game. I don't know. Not very knowledgeable about video games. But now having played Horizon Zero Dawn, which is, you know, an open world game, I'm like, okay, I think I know enough that I can have fun while playing Witcher. Because for the first time when I first played Horizon Zero Dawn, I was not having fun, guys. I was very stressed. I was very scared all the time. And now I'm able to have fun and like play with all the toys and stuff like that. Like I'm really good with traps, guys. I'm very good at cheesing the game with traps. But that's this video. I know it's kind of rambly. It's not like really coherent, but that's like where my mental headspace is. It's kind of how I mentally do goals when I do need them. And yeah, I don't think anyone has to do goals this time of year. It's kind of an arbitrary date, but for me it is a good reset, especially because it distracts me from the fact that the holidays are over, because I get big depression when the holidays are over. I'm like, okay, now it's just dark and cold and there's nothing to look forward to. So if you're feeling that way, I'm with you. I'm definitely with you. Let me know any goals you have down below. We do have in my Discord a yearly reading goal chat that people always post things in. You can also find other reading challenges people participate in if you want. So if you want to be with a bunch of people for that, like I know one of the bloggers who I've been friends with forever has a Space Invaders challenge yearly, and this one's a speculative year. Last year was sci-fi. So if you've played that game and you want like that type of challenge sheet, we have that pinned there. So definitely come join us in the Discord if you want to look at anything like that. If you want to just leave an emoji, leave a New Year's emoji, you know, one of those party emojis or something like that. And like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.